In this video, we're going to go over 5 things that will make you stronger. And not physical strength, but emotional strength. Like your ability to handle pressure and your ability to stare down the judgment of other people without being affected or caring what they think. Or in other words, the result of going through these 5 things is increased inner strength and confidence in life. Underneath the surface, these 5 things are all actually very much related to each other, and you should start to see a common theme emerge as we go through them, and we'll tie all of this together with the very last one, which you could even use as a guiding principle for all of life. So you can go out and continuously harvest the kind of experiences that will lead to making you stronger and stronger over time. So the first thing is rejection. When you face rejection, basically what's happening is that because we are a social animal, we've evolved to be dependent on the group for survival. So our psychology is completely intertwined with the forces of the social world around us in whatever situation that we're in. So if we feel accepted and validated by the group, then it naturally unlocks our energy and makes us more comfortable to express ourselves and just be ourselves. But when you face rejection, it's basically like this kind of validation is ripped away from you and turned against you, which has the opposite sort of effect of stripping you of energy and shutting you down. This is a survival mechanism to prevent you from overstepping your role or position within the group so that you don't trigger any sort of retaliation from the group, which in our evolutionary history could result in you even getting killed. So when you face rejection, it actually hurts. And this pain exists in order to protect you from this kind of social backlash. So there's a natural tendency to avoid expressing yourself or avoid situations altogether where you feel that you might get rejected, so that you avoid having to face this kind of wrath of the crowd being turned against you. But because of this, it's easy to become kind of like a slave to the judgment and opinions of the group, or a slave to society, where you sort of fit into your role and just go through the motions and maybe even live out your entire life without truly being able to express your real self, because it's sort of pent up and trapped inside of you, suppressed by the forces of the social world around you. But if you actually face rejection, then it will force your system to adapt to it and build up a tolerance to rejection. So you're not so dependent on the validation of the group, but instead you build up a confidence that comes from within, so you can go out and express yourself and do whatever it is that you want to do without being constrained by the fear of rejection. So in other words, by facing rejection, you build up a force inside of yourself to overpower any future rejection that you might face. And this results in having a sort of magnetic influence over the world around you, rather than you being the one reacting to the possible negative judgments or rejection from other people. The second thing that will make you stronger is embarrassment. And this is very much related to rejection, where again, it involves facing the negative judgments of the crowd. And basically, in the same way that we were just talking about, by facing embarrassment, you will also build up a tolerance to these negative judgments and build up internal confidence that is not dependent on the validation of the group. But the most important thing to keep in mind is that you have to properly face and digest the feeling of embarrassment, because there can be a tendency to try and sort of escape from that feeling, either by trying to manage other people's opinions, like trying to change the way that they think about you and get rid of this feeling, or maybe in your own mind, just not really facing it, like trying not to think about it or whatever. But in order to build up the kind of inner strength that we're talking about, what you need to do is basically fight off what you feel is the judgment of other people, and fight off whatever kind of negative opinions you feel that they're thinking about you. And this battle takes place basically within your own mind. where you have to sort of give the middle finger in all directions and say fuck you to anyone who you feel might have that kind of negative opinion about you. This is a kind of frame battle, where it's your frame or your perspective versus what you feel is the frame or the judgment or opinions of other people. It's kind of like a dog barking to ward off any threats of animals that might invade its territory. You basically have to do this in your own mind to ward off the negative judgments of other people that are threatening to invade your psychological territory. And if you keep fighting it off like this, then you'll eventually get to the point where you simply no longer care whether or not people think these negative things about you. It just won't affect you anymore. And because of that, you will have confidence in the face of whatever situation or circumstances that caused you to feel embarrassed in the first place. And because of the confidence that you project, it will actually influence the way that people see you and think about you, so that they no longer even have these negative thoughts about you that you were originally embarrassed about. Or in other words, just like with facing rejection, you build up an outward force of confidence and magnetism coming from within yourself that has an influence over the world around you. The third thing that will make you stronger is heartbreak. Just like we talked about earlier, how our psychology is completely intertwined with the judgments and validation of the crowd or society as a whole, it's also intertwined with validation and rejection involving romantic relationships. This has to do with how humans have evolved in a way where men and women are interdependent on each other, basically for the sake of reproducing and raising children, which for humans is something that takes a lot of time and energy. So this is the emotional glue that holds relationships together, and it's a necessary element in our overall survival as a species. And just like we were talking about with the previous examples, heartbreak also basically comes from validation being ripped away from you and turned against you, but this kind of romantic validation affects you at a much deeper level because of how deeply it is intertwined with your entire emotional being. And because of this, it also takes a lot longer to recover from, compared with just a typical kind of rejection. But you will eventually recover from it. And once you do, it's the same as with the previous examples, where by going through this, your system will adapt and become stronger and more tolerant to this kind of deep level rejection in the future. Like if you've ever experienced heartbreak before, the first time you go through it, it can be completely devastating, maybe even the worst pain that you ever experience in your life. But then if you go through the same thing multiple times, over time it gets easier and easier to deal with, and it takes less time to recover from, and it doesn't affect you nearly as much. And by going through this, you build up the deep level inner emotional strength so that you're not dependent on one special person to fulfill your infantile emotional dependencies. And the less dependent you are on any one girl and the less you need her, then the less needy you will be in your behavior and otherwise, and the more success you will actually have with women because of this. So in the same way that you can develop a sort of magnetic influence over the world around you by facing rejection, you can also develop a sexual magnetism and greater ability to attract girls. And we'll talk more specifically about attraction and dating in future videos. But for now, the point is that heartbreak is something that over time will make you a lot stronger and at a very deep level. The fourth thing that will make you stronger is failure. This is also very similar to rejection, and it usually includes some form of rejection, but it's also more than that, where you're trying to accomplish something and you put your whole identity and reputation on the line, and then you fail. This can bring feelings of shame and feeling like you are a failure and that you don't live up to the standards of society or the standards of whatever it is that you failed at. But again, all of these negative feelings have to do with the judgment and opinions of other people, like how you feel that others will look at you and feeling inferior to other people and stuff like that. So by facing failure, just like with all the previous examples, you build up a tolerance to this kind of shame and dejection and whatever other kinds of negative feelings that you experience, and you build up the strength to handle these kinds of feelings. And in truth, your ability to eventually succeed depends on having this kind of strength and tolerance to failure. It's just like what we just talked about with girls, where you will be less needy, where you don't need success, or in other words, you don't need the validation that comes from success. And when you no longer need it, then you will be more likely to actually have success because you have the confidence within yourself to bring it into reality. In Chinese, there's a saying, failure is the mother of success. It's a necessary step on the path to success. And actually, if your success is not built upon a solid foundation of past failures, then at some point it will probably all come crashing down anyways. So it's necessary to go through failure. And this is true for absolutely everything. So by now, you should be able to see a common theme with all of these examples. With each one, you are facing the negative judgments of other people. And by doing this, it forces you to build up inner strength and confidence that comes from within, so you're not dependent on external validation. And continuing with this theme, the fifth and final thing that we're going to cover here, which ties all of this together and can also even serve as a guiding principle for all of life, is going against the grain. Like we talked about earlier, if you rely on the validation of the crowd, then you can be basically like a slave to the judgments of the group or a slave to society. But if you go against the grain or go against these forces of social validation of the crowd, then you can think of it kind of like a hydroelectric dam standing its ground and resisting the overall force of a river. By doing so, it absorbs and converts this force into a massive amount of electricity. So in the same way, by going against the grain, you will absorb the forces of the social world and undergo stress adaptations on a cellular level to convert these forces into a kind of confidence and magnetism inside of yourself. There are many different ways that you can do this. For example, like putting yourself out there, disagreeing and voicing your opinions, actively striving towards something in the face of resistance, doing things where there is a possibility of failure or rejection or embarrassment or heartbreak or anything we've already talked about in this video. And if you always strive to do these kinds of things and go against the grain, then over time you will definitely become stronger and stronger. If you want step-by-step instructions on how to do all of this in a systematic way that's like a form of training, then just click on the link in the description. Other than that, you can also follow this channel where this is sort of the basic underlying theme of building inner strength and confidence in the face of judgments and opinions of other people. And you can start by watching the video that should pop up on the screen right now.